Welcome to another episode of Go FUD Yourself. Kiara here, and I have a very special guest today, Ron Hammond.
Ron, I really appreciate it.
Where is that incredible view behind you?
If it's not obvious, we got Washington D.C. in the Capitol in the background here. I got the Library of Congress over on the other side. So yeah, I'm right about a quarter mile away here in Navy Yard, but D.C. proper.
Amazing. You're joining us from D.C., and that's because you are with the Blockchain Association, right?
That's right. So we're a trade association. I'm the in-house lobbyist for them. Mostly do the Republican side of the aisle. I have a colleague who's the Democrat side, but yep, I'm usually in that building over there on Capitol Hill, talking to members of Congress, staff, and then folks at the White House and relative agencies.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you get a little bit of an AC break while you talk to us. I don't feel quite so bad about dragging you off the hill in that way.
It's so hot. So obviously I'm not in a suit and tie right now because they're soaked in sweat from walking that quarter mile. So it's a little hot here in DC for a full suit and tie, but they're in session. I mean, the members are voting, so I gotta be all dressed up. I wish I could be in a little crypto T-shirt, but that's frowned upon here in DC.
Well, we'll send you a T-shirt. You can wear it under in the winter. Tell me a little bit about the Blockchain Association. What are you doing in America? What are you doing in DC? Why do you exist for us?
Yeah, sure thing. So, everyone hears lobbying. They think like, ooh, like that's a very mysterious, underhanded way. But actually, it's more educational than anything. So, Blockchain Association, we're comprised of over 110 companies in the crypto space, ranging from stablecoin issuers like Circle. We have exchanges like Kraken and eToro. We got DeFi projects like DYDX. We got Uniswap. NFT companies as well, like Dapper Labs. So we range the gambit, and more importantly, Rome blockchain as well. So we range the gambit of all things crypto. So if it touches crypto in any way, shape, or form, we're usually involved because there's a lot of issues here in DC that need to be resolved. And so our job is pretty much to educate policymakers, staff, and say, hey, look, this is what the technology is. It's really complicated. Don't worry, I'm here to help you out. And let's make sure we get the right rules and regulations in place to protect consumers, but also making sure that the United States is a leader in this space. Unfortunately, that's not been the case recently. But we just want to make sure that folks know what they can and can't do as businesses. And that's what we're here for, is to make sure that we help get the rules of the road here in DC for the entire nation.
Amazing. I'm not a lobbyist, so I have a really genuine question about how this works. When you are approaching different politicians, when you're given a news story, are you trying to create a narrative that is a positive narrative so that it's something that people buy into and want to participate in? Or do you try to create a fearful narrative so that you can become kind of that leadership in a difficult time?
I think it's kind of in between. It's not really trying to portray, like this is like the hype machine here we see sometimes on crypto Twitter, or the doomsday scenario that we've seen sometimes for the national security side. We're just like, look, this thing is really complicated. I used to be a Congressional Hill staffer, so I would take 10 to 12 meetings a day. And like I would cover finance, for example. That covers flood insurance, normal insurance, crypto, private equity. A wide variety of issues. And so it's really hard for a member of Congress and a staffer to spend, more than 30 minutes on a single really important topic. So my job mostly is like, look, crypto is very complicated. It evolves on a daily basis. So I'm here to say, hey, like, what's fact and fiction, what's true, what's not, and just understand that they are well informed, so that when it comes time to writing legislation or to answering questions to regulators, they at least are more informed. They can make an opinion themselves of like what they should ask or what policies they should be going for. Because again, there's just so many issues here in the United States that folks are dealing with, and it's so hard to keep track of it. So I keep mostly just informing folks what's happening here in DC.
Awesome. Thank you for the rundown. It's good to know a little bit more about how that works. I think the only experience I've personally had with lobbyists is the movie Thank You for Smoking. So I'm excited to hear that it isn't quite as cagey as that, and is actually a really legitimate thing that is helping the crypto industry quite a lot.
It's a lot of fun. It's a great career. I've been really excited to be part of it. And, the good thing too is also just there's a lot of folks on the lobbying side that have come recently into the crypto space. For a long time, it was just like 3 people. And so it was a Coin Center and Blockchain Association. And then that's pretty much it. But when I joined the Blockchain Association, kind of joined, the dark side of lobbying, it's been cool to see that, Coinbase, Kraken, all these companies start actually having folks here in DC who are on the ground educating. So we're all one big family in terms of we're always talking to each other, sharing intel, whether they're part of the Blockchain Association or not. But it's a fast moving issue. Like my bank lobbyist friends are saying, like, I have no idea how y'all keep up because there's just so many like scandals and drama and everything happening in this space on a weekly basis. Whereas, banking stuff, it's kind of boring. And so it's really, actually, again, I like it because it's very high energy and it's always changing. And it's never a boring day, for better or for worse.
That's the fun of it. There's always new information. Like today, we're going to talk about the Bitcoin ETF proposals. So how they're going for review. I'm excited to find out what the Blockchain Association thinks about that. And then we're going to talk about Prometheum, which is a really big deal. Everyone is upset about Prometheum or really stoked about Prometheum. So I'm curious to see. I know the Blockchain Association is specifically urging the SEC to investigate within that. And then if we have time, we'll also talk about XRP and maybe a bipartisan anonymity bill in DeFi. So with that, let's play our silly song. So, Ron, have you been following the ETF debacle?
For quite some time. Yes, I have. It's been a lot happening here. So, but a lot of great developments recently. So that's the good news is that I think we're making a lot of progress here, but it's been a really interesting saga. It still has yet to be resolved.
It does have yet to be resolved. So one of the things that I've said on Go FUD Yourself is that we keep seeing this in the news, is that it's being approved, it's going for review, it's being approved, it's going for review. And I think a lot of that is kind of like a clickbait hype machine, because there hasn't actually been a ton of progress based on what's happened so far. They've just been going back and forth. And I'm kind of curious what you think about that back and forth. Do you think that it will make it more likely for these ETF proposals to be accepted? Do you think this is kind of like a delaying ploy by the SEC? How do you think we can move forward from this?
Yeah, sure thing. So there's two types of ETFs, and actually maybe taking it one step further back, why is the ETF important? For some folks, at least in the institutional side, these are the more TradFi folks. They see the ETF as a vehicle for them to be investing more in Bitcoin. So that's why a lot of folks, both within the crypto industry and outside the crypto industry, really care about it, because this is a way to get more traditional finance folks into the space who have a legacy of compliance, but also making sure this is a legit asset class, also bringing more legitimacy to the space as a whole. So whether you're in crypto or on the fence of crypto, the ETF is kind of a way to merge those two camps together. So we have a futures ETF, but we don't have a spot ETF. And actually, ironically, we're one of the few countries that doesn't have a spot ETF. So what's important about the recent filings is the biggest one has been BlackRock. They filed for a spot ETF very recently. And a lot of folks in this in the traditional space, as well as crypto, said, if they're getting involved for applying for one, that's a sign. That's a huge sign that one of the biggest asset manager or the biggest asset manager wants to get involved in the space. But the SEC has been rebuffing them, Grayscale, and several others for years now, saying that they don't have the proper guardrails to protect market manipulation. So, but the truth is, and this is where Grayscale has sued the SEC. They said, look, your arguments do not make any sense. And it seems like you're more delaying the crypto native folks to making room for the BlackRocks or the Fidelities or the other ones who are applying for this ETF. And it seems like what you're trying to do is all the early adapters who worked really hard to get to this space to bring traditional finance into the crypto space are going to lose out, and you're just going to give it to the traditional finance folks who have built a legacy of decades of being more in the traditional finance space. So the thing also to keep in consideration is that the Ripple case you mentioned earlier, it seemed like the Grayscale case is actually going really well against the SEC. And so I think that's why we're seeing a lot more traditional folks saying, hey, look, Grayscale, they took the first plunge. They got denied several times. They sued the SEC, and it looks like they're going to win this case. And so that, I think, has led to BlackRock and others who have a tradition of not getting rejected on ETFs, not just crypto, but all over the spectrum. They have not been denied largely 90% of the time, I think 95% of the time. So they know what they're doing. They have, and I know folks at BlackRock who are probably involved in these decisions, they wouldn't have gone forward. They didn't think they had a chance here with the Grayscale case. And so I think it's a sign that, hey, look, it's the SEC's losing the narrative here that's in terms of Grayscale, but also losing the narrative that crypto is this unregulated system, because obviously if the biggest asset manager wants to get involved, it's probably a sign that they're pretty confident that this is actually going to be here to stay for quite some time.
You did mention something interesting, that being that with somebody like BlackRock entering, that we are seeing these TradFi incumbents who have the big pocketbooks, who can really dive in there, and they do have that ability to kind of like make sway, make waves, kind of fight. But that might impact some of those who were earlier movers in the crypto space. Do you think that we'll see, with something like a spot ETF coming through with BlackRock, do you think we'll just see an influx of TradFi, or is there still kind of a chance for the little guy in blockchain?
I think there's room for both here. I think that's where the Grayscale especially says, hey, look, I think seeing these other big TradFi folks getting involved, if you approve them but you don't approve us, then there's obviously more grounds to sue them on. I think that's also a big impetus right now of saying, hey, look, I think there should be multiple products that get approved. I think we've seen this historically in the past where they approve one, they typically approve several others after the fact. So the question is, no one's been able to get that spot ETF approval. I like to mention again, Canada and other countries that are well regulated, they already have spot ETFs. The United States is not. And so that's been a really big sticking point here. And the general consensus here in DC is that if the SEC approves one, they're going to have to approve several others. And that's why we've seen several more kind of getting into the pipeline in terms of waiting approval, because obviously you don't want to have a monopoly for just one company or one product being the only spot ETF. So I think that's what the consensus is here. But we'll see what happens. Again, the SEC is still yet to accept a single one, and they push back on these other requests on spot ETFs, including BlackRock. So we'll see what happens on that front. The SEC
what is their holdback with the spot ETFs? Is it a power control thing? I mean, you would think at a base level that it would be about regulation, but if we're seeing it already passed in other countries, like the neighbor of Canada, what would the SEC's primary holdback be about the ETF?
It's largely their concerns about market manipulation, as well as watching the spot markets in terms of just making sure that, there's legitimate claims to some of these points here saying, hey, look, we believe that there is some market manipulation occurring. We've seen that before with things like Binance, for example. But at the same time, they really haven't provided a pathway going forward. They just said, hey, it's inadequate, your application. And that's to BlackRock, Grayscale, and several others. And I think it's been kind of slowly trickling that, hey, I think the SEC is overreaching here, and they're really controlling and choking off the industry here. And again, I want to point to the other countries, G7 nations, legitimate countries. These aren't like, some sketchy islands in the Caribbean. These are legitimate G7 nations who have approved these products. And we're sitting here saying, I don't believe that market manipulation, is enough of a holdout here from the Blockchain Association view. So that's why we're joining Grayscale and fighting the SEC on this front. So we'll see if the TradFi folks are able to bring the SEC closer, but it has yet to see to happen at this point.
One of the things that I know crypto Twitter is up in arms about is that BlackRock will now kind of look like that crypto sweetheart in terms of the SEC. So if others have been applying for years and keep getting denied and BlackRock leads the way, it's kind of like, well, that seems a little bit unfair, which is similar to what we're seeing with Prometheum. People are not happy about Prometheum. Can you talk about what the Blockchain Association is doing about Prometheum, with Prometheum, against Prometheum?
Yeah, sure thing. So this is for level set here. Prometheum got approved for a special purpose broker-dealer license, the first of its kind. No one's ever really heard of Prometheum. They didn't have too much of a DC presence. They weren't engaged too much here. And then we come to learn after this approval, they go on this PR tour, including the PR tour extends to Congress here. And I was in that hearing. I was actually sitting right behind the Prometheum witness, so it was fun to watch that actually play out in real life. But you can tell he was trying to reiterate these talking points that, see, the SEC has been right the entire time, actually. The securities laws are clear from the 1930s. Like, that's how we should regulate crypto. The problem is that the more deeper you look, there's some really sketchy things here. Most notably, there's just no business model. They can't trade Ethereum. They can't trade Bitcoin. So the question is, what can they trade? What tokens are securities that they can trade here? Because that's been the whole crux here. What's security, what's not? I think the Ripple case also blows that up as well. And so it was very weird. Again, this SEC has been really strategic. They've been releasing, certain enforcement actions, right, at opportune times politically. Again, that happens all the time in DC. But it's really weird to see that from a securities regulator, a banking regulator being so political. It makes a little more sense when it comes to some of these other more dicey topics here. But it's banking. It's supposed to be very the facts. What's facts, what's real, what's not, and balls and strikes. And we have not seen that really from this SEC. It's been pretty political. And Prometheum raises a lot of questions. And folks like Robinhood are saying, hey, look, we've been applying for this application for years, and you deny us year after year after year. But somehow you give us this no-name company that has no business model and who's going on PR tours saying that the rules are clear when they said 2 years ago in a letter that the rules weren't clear. So I think they caught themselves here. They overextended, they were trying to show up to Coinbase candidly. See, this is what happens when you apply with or comply with the rules that we lay out. And Coinbase says, well, they don't have a business model, A, and B, it seems pretty timely that you give them approval and then the next week you sue us. It's definitely very politically timed. That's also why they probably timed it with Binance being sued the same day or the day before Coinbase. They're trying to lump them in together as bad actors, but that wasn't the case. Binance is doing way more sketchier and illegal things, whereas Coinbase is, been trying to work the SEC for years. 30 plus meetings with the SEC, whereas Binance, slim to none. So like, I think this just shows that the SEC was being political. And I have believed this, honestly, they overplayed their hand here. And it's really opened up a lot of questions that both sides of the aisle here in Congress are saying, that looks a little sus. We're going to have to do a little more investigating here.
This is something we talk about pretty often here at Go FUD Yourself. So the idea of Go FUD Yourself is that we dispel the FUD. So you're looking at clickbait, you're looking at crypto Twitter, you're feeling bad about it, you're feeling great about it. There's FUD, there's hype. You need to put on your critical thinking hat and really consider what's going on. And one of the things that we wonder about somebody like Prometheum getting through or BlackRock getting through is who are the bad actors in these spaces, right? And how can we kind of protect ourselves within the crypto space from regulation in such a way that it's impacting us in this negative way? And where I'm kind of going with that is, yes, we had Coinbase who met with regulators over 30 times and then nevertheless got sued. So, one way that you would normally think that you're going to protect yourself is through that consultation process. But we haven't seen evidence of that so far. So would the Blockchain Association recommend that we continue to do that consultation process? Do you think that that's going to be really negative for those who are participating in the crypto space? How can we kind of move forward from that lesson?
Yeah, so it's a couple things. So I think 2022 especially really left a bad taste in a lot of folks' mouth here in DC. FTX is probably the poster child of someone who was a bad actor, who was engaging in DC more than anyone I've ever seen. I ran at SBF all the time. We would see each other at receptions and certain political events. And no one knew about his fraud, but he was always really pushing this really aggressive agenda, really trying to go after DeFi, candidly. He was trying to get rules and regulations in place that would give centralized exchanges, your Coinbase, your Robinhood, your FTXs, and apply that to DeFi, which didn't make sense. Even Coinbase recognized saying, look, this benefits us in terms of we have our rules and regulations. That's important. But if you're going to screw over DeFi, we're not going to be joining this effort here. And everyone was kind of wondering, what's SBF? Why is FTX doing this? Why are they so aggressive? And then it came out, I guess we're learning more now with each day with the court case, but they were bleeding money. They were hemorrhaging money. They were stealing customer funds. They were lying to Congress to their face. I've had several of my friends who work on Capitol Hill saying, yes, they told me to my face, they don't commingle customer funds. And that was an outright lie. Yeah. We were hearing the same rumors about Terra about 6 months before it collapsed there's something a little sketchy here. Celsius, same thing. And that's why, Binance, we've been telling folks for over a year now here in DC, Binance has got a really bad reputation. There's possible sanction evasions. And I think there's a lot more stories coming out in the next couple of months. So again, and I talk about my job as a lobbyist, it's more just trying to tell folks, hey, look, to your point, there's a lot of FUD, there's a lot of hype. And I just want to cut through here and say, look, here's fact and fiction. Here's what we're hearing. Just be careful, because as we saw in FTX, a lot of folks really did align themselves close to FTX. They took the campaign donations. They got really excited. Again, mind you too, most folks, almost everyone did not know about the fraud, but they really got burned badly, especially the members of Congress. Both sides of the aisle took a lot of money and they had to give it back. So now that sting is still there. And so I think, our job is to make sure that hey, look, if we see more, sketchy things coming down the pipeline, is to warn folks, but also to let them know, look, we should make rules and regulations, because right now that's just gonna be the status quo. We're just gonna have bad actors keep seeping in until we have rules and regulations of what business can and can't do. It's gonna be really hard to distinguish who are the legitimate players and who are just trying to go in for themselves and who's going for a big rug pull. And so that's been the big thing, because obviously the SEC has been missing all of these actions, and they're suing FTX a year after the fact, Terra a year after the fact, Celsius a year after the fact. It's great, thank you very much, but everyone's already been harmed. You haven't protected the consumers. You're just trying to get a trophy here for the sake of having a trophy.
To me, that's very much like them trying to go back in time with Kraken as well to 2016 to get people's personal information for taxes. It's well, if those regulations about taxes didn't exist at that time, I don't know how you think you're going to enforce them.
Exactly. And the good actors, at least the hope is that folks would have compliance programs and making sure that folks have segregated accounts and stuff like that between the business and customers. But the reality is that the folks who are bad actors see this lack of the lack of clarity here and says, I'm just going to exploit this as much as I can. And then when the heat gets too much on me, I'm going to go somewhere or try to get away from the authorities, like Do Kwon. Obviously, it did not work for him. But that's why we keep telling Congress, look, this is a major issue. Let's just get the guardrails in, because the good folks like the Coinbases of the world, the Krakens of the world, they want to stay here. But when you have other folks upending the business models and basically running around the law, it's a very difficult story, and candidly, it hurts consumers. These are the folks who are harmed at the end of the day.
We did see Coinbase consult with the SEC for a couple of years, and then nevertheless get sued by the SEC. So how can we kind of move forward from that? Those who are good players and want to ensure that the regulation is good and want to ensure that there's still innovation within America, they've been kind of off-put. It's not like they really want to consult with those government bodies anymore. Is that something that we can go through the Blockchain Association for, or is there another way for us to continue that consultation?
Yeah, I think that's the issue right now. It's just that the SEC has this like kingmaker proposal or idea. Like, you have to come in and talk to us. That's what the SEC chair says. Come in and talk with us. Come into compliance. The problem is that the compliance is not compatible with technology. I mean, again, we're seeing that now play out in the courts with the XRP case, again, showing that narrative that, hey, look, the SEC has been wrong here. These are not securities. And that's been a very, very difficult conversation. We've been talking to the SEC at the Blockchain Association on behalf of several of our companies for years now. And we're moving the ball forwards incrementally. But at the end of the day, the SEC has decided to, instead of trying to come up with rules and regulations, they have decided to actually go the opposite direction and just say, you know what, we're just going to go after the low-hanging fruit. The bad actors or the ones that don't have the money to defend themselves, like library. And then we're going to go after the big one after we built enough case law rapport to go after the top dogs of Binance and Coinbase. And so I think that's been kind of like their strategy. And unfortunately, it's really harmed the industry. Where a lot of folks we're talking to in our membership, again, big companies who are in the United States or want to be in the United States, they're saying, why risk it? Why would I, if I was a company, very legitimate actor here, and one day the SEC decides to go after stable coins, they decide to go after DeFi, solely to make an example out of them, when I can just go to the EU, which put rules and regulations. And again, they're not like all great for industry. Like they have some strict requirements, but at the end of the day, at least they know what they can and can't do. Whereas right now, it's kind of you can and can't do in the United States. We're not really sure, but if you push it one end or the other, you could find yourselves an enforcement action. Or in the case of Coinbase, you can do everything you can to be compliant and to try to meet them in the middle, or at least to find a way forward. And at the end of the day, still get sued. And it costs them a lot of money. The Ripple case, I think the CEO said it was like $22 million to defend themselves in court. And if you're a business saying, look, if I'm going to be in the United States, but it costs me millions of dollars in legal resources, it's not worth it. I'm gonna have to go somewhere else. And that's what we're seeing right now.
Absolutely. It's interesting talking about how regulation might stifle innovation. Have you taken a look at the new bipartisan bill that crypto Twitter is saying might kill anonymity in DeFi? It's mostly about KYC, reporting customer documents, including at things like Bitcoin ATMs. I'm just not sure if that's something that you're privy to.
Very much so. Taking a lot of my time on top of everything else going on with stablecoins and such. But in short, basically, here's what's happening. So members of Congress are getting briefed by the Pentagon and others saying, look, it's mostly around North Korea. North Korea is getting the Ronin Bridge hack. They're getting the Axie Infinity hack. They're getting funding for crypto hacks to the nuclear program. And North Korea, through sanctions, the TradFi system, have been pretty cut off from resources for a while. But a lot of senior senators, again, they're like 75 years or older for the most part, are going to these intel briefings. They're closed door, and they're being told North Korea is using crypto to fund their nuclear program. And there are limited tools that these guys can use to crack down here. And again, we have a lot of sanctions and stuff already in place. And so what this bill, the intention was, is we basically don't want North Korea to utilize crypto and DeFi in particular to fund their program. The problem is that that's not the way that DeFi works. You don't have this information. And again, there are ways to make sure we can cut off folks in the DeFi space from benefiting North Korea, or try to make cybersecurity measures better so that North Korea doesn't hack these DeFi protocols and take all the money for their their ambitions in the nuclear side here. But I think it's somewhere in the middle, where we have a group of older senators who, again, it's going to be really hard, almost impossible to explain DeFi to these folks. I mean, they barely grasp Bitcoin at this current moment. And then to explain them, like, look, these guys really want to go after North Korea, and they see DeFi as that bridge of making this happen. And therefore, the only tool in the toolbox is let's screw over DeFi here and apply all these rules to them. But again, the DeFi protocols just do not have the capability to do that. I do think there's a middle ground here. I do think there's a way that we can make sure that we have the protections for customers, we protect privacy, but we don't make sure that these hacks lead to North Korea getting nuclear funding. So that's the impetus behind the bill. But I'll say this is a very serious bill. There's been a lot of talks about Elizabeth Warren and her bill on money laundering. This is a different set of senators. This is a very serious set of members, bipartisan again. And I'm urging folks here, like, if you're in the DeFi space, this is a serious threat. I mean, this is something that can be signed into law next year. So we're definitely something that we're working on it. We're trying to work with policymakers to find that middle ground. But it's going to be quite a battle for quite some time.
So, of course, if a DeFi company wants to work with the Blockchain Association and support fighting this kind of bill. We understand how to do that. We can join the blockchain association. But if you are an individual who is, a degen, you're a trader, you're in DeFi, you really believe in the ethos of DeFi, and these types of things worry you, what can we actually do about it?
You should work with your, first off, reaching out to your senator is actually really important. They listen to constituents. I mean, I was one of the Hill staffers that we would get letters all the time from folks I was working for a member for Ohio, but so it's like we get it from Ohio 8, and we would have to respond as staff and talk to the member of Congress, like, sir, how do you want to respond to this letter from this constituent? I mean, these are conversations that happen behind the scenes, but having someone from your district reach out is important. Now, you want to make sure you reach out to the member of Congress that represents you, though. So, like, let's just say if I reach out to Mitt Romney, who's on that bill for the DeFi, I'm not in Utah. They literally have a filter that will say, like, he's not in Utah, we're going to push that to the side. So make sure you reach out to your senator. And that's just a really thing I want to harp to folks. A lot of folks talk to Elizabeth Warren. I can guarantee you those get pushed to the side because they don't live in her state. So reach out to your individual member of Congress, because that starts the process. That starts staff saying, what is this bill? And then the staff go, hey, Blockchain Association, can you tell us more about this bill? Because I got this letter from someone in my state or my district. And that's how the process starts. And that's how we educate them. Here's what the bill does. Here's what they're trying to do, but here's where they missed the mark. And that's literally how the process works here in DC is that engagement and collaboration. And that staffer goes to the member of Congress saying, sir, I'm sure you don't know what DeFi is, but let me tell you what you're trying to do. And we're kind of making improve this legislation. So it's a whole process, but reach out to your representatives. Twitter's great. But I will say the member of Congress is going to have to respond to you more likely if you send them an email or a letter rather than, tag them in a tweet, because there's no way they're going to be able to respond to that in time.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for joining us and for putting some of the onus onto our own hands and taking some of that impetus away from everyone having to spend $220 million in an SEC lawsuit. It's really nice to get someone from the Hill to understand where some of these things are coming from, to understand who's thinking about it, why they're thinking about it, and in what way they're thinking about it, because sometimes we get into our own little bubble of, crypto Twitter, DeFi Twitter. So thank you so much for being on here, Ron. If people want to get a hold of you or they want to work with the Blockchain Association, where should they go?
You can follow me on Twitter, Ron W. Hammond. I do a weekly Congress and crypto thread, so I just kind of break down what's happening on the Hill. So that's a great way to stay informed, but also just to kind of see what the Blockchain Association is doing. As I'll say, next week it's going to be really big for Capitol Hill because we're going to be voting on stablecoins and SEC versus CFTC jurisdiction in one of the committees. So stay tuned. It's going to be really important. And then the Blockchain Association, you can reach us at theblockchainassociation.org.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ron.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Go FUD yourself.
Will do.
I thought you might say it back. I thought I would test.